Well, good morning.
How are you?
How is everybody this morning?
You just started.
Are you hot and hairy? See what y'all did? There you go, Jerry. Jerry and I talked this week. Y'all did that. We are so appreciative of that. 5 years. I had to go yesterday, or, yeah, I was invited. Went yesterday to Dixon. I had to do a funeral for a lady that I've known for many years. Anyway, we were talking about time and how time passes so quickly. And I said, well, if you stop thinking about it, I hadn't been at Pomona in 6 years. I said, I've been at River Road 5 years. And they said, really? And I said, yeah, but look at that little fellow right there. He just graduated from will graduate in May from Wake Forest. And I said, I remember when I did his mom and daddy's wedding. So there you go. So time passes by quickly, doesn't it? Oh, we're glad that you hope that we believe this will be a good day. We're thankful for all those that you invited. Suzanne and I invited quite a few, and we'll be sitting by ourselves. They weren't able to come. Remember all of my folks in prayers, and some will be here in a few weeks maybe. So anyway, we hope that if nothing, that it's not the number. In reality, it's the individuals, number one. And number two, it's the idea of getting out and making sure that folks know River Road is here, that it exists, that we're alive and we're well. And so that is a big part of this as well. And, for various reasons, my brother-in-law and sister couldn't come, and we were talking to them last night, and I hope they'll come here in a few weeks, maybe things even out for them. But as Suzanne said, just come on a regular Sunday. I thought all Sundays were regular. Anyway, but we're glad that you're here. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Our most kind, gracious, and loving Heavenly Father, we're indeed thankful to you for this day. We're thankful that you've allowed us to rise to see it, and you've given us the health and strength that we've been able to come and meet together. We're thankful that you love us and that you watch over us and take care of us. We ask your richest blessings upon those that are traveling and will be traveling to us here in the next few minutes. We also ask that you be with those that we know and love that are going through some difficult times, whether it be mental or physical or just difficulties in life. We ask as well that you watch over all of them and bless them and keep them. Be with us as we go through this period of study, that we will have our hearts open and our minds and eyes open as well to the things that you have revealed to us. We ask that you be with us now. Bless us and hold us as we hold to you. For this is our prayer, Christ. Amen. We're going through a series of lessons on these things we believe. We've talked about the existence of God, the deity of Christ. We've talked about the Bible, the inspiration of the Bible, how the Bible also authorizes things that we're to do and not to do. We've spent time talking the last couple of weeks about the church. We talked about the importance of the church, the vitality of the church, and we talked about the church from the standpoint of, excuse me, of our worship and why it's important that it does really make a difference. And we'll talk about that idea of it does make a difference here in a few weeks in the sermon as well. But we move on. These things we believe. The subject this morning is we believe in an afterlife. We believe in heaven and hell and that they're real. And that's at least part of that subject. As I was thinking and developing this lesson this week, I thought, part of this lesson folks have no problem believing. They have no problem trusting it. They truly believe, they trust in the fact that there's a heaven. And if you go to the funeral home, no one ever says, well, my mama or my daddy's going to heaven. No one. But everyone will tell you, well, my mom and my daddy, no matter what they are, what they believe, my mom and daddy are in heaven. We ultimately leave all that to the judgment of God. But we do understand this, that the Bible teaches that there's an afterlife. And in that afterlife, there is a heaven and there is a hell. And one of two places everyone will go to. We do understand, and let's kind of, if you will, before we get to that very point, let's kind of back up a little bit and just say these are things we believe. We believe that life is a blessing from God. Remember, God formed man out of the dust of the earth, the scriptures tells us. Breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. That's a blessing. He gives to all life and breath and all things, Paul said in Mars Hill in Acts 17. That's God. That's what you and I have. We have the blessing of breath. We have the blessing of strength. We have the blessing of health. But all that has come from God. Death entered into the world. Why did it enter into the world? Well, we might argue and we might spend time, and we have in times past talked about the fact that it would appear as if, through a study of the book of Genesis, that God made man mortal. But in the garden, he had the right to the tree of life. And thus, with the tree of life, the opportunity to live forever. However, because of Adam's transgression, because of what Adam did, and thus being cast out of the garden, never to come back, never to be able to come back, that right to the tree of life is gone. It is no more. And Paul would write in Romans chapter 5, wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, so death has passed upon all men, for all have sinned. Now I understand, and we've talked about this before, that you look at that verse there as Paul wrote it, and one of the things that you might say is that's not talking about physical death. It's talking about spiritual death. And so we've taken that verse and we've applied it in one area when it literally, from a contextual standpoint, applies to another. But yet the reality of it is that we can look in Genesis and say, it's there too, doesn't it? Could it have dual meaning? Sure. We do understand with regards to sin that sin is considered death in the Bible as well. But we understand then, man is given life, cast out of the garden, thus given an appointment. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27, right? First appointed men wants to die. And after this, the judgment. We don't like that. We don't like the subject of death. We want to avoid the subject of death. Because there's so much that lies beyond what is here that we don't really know and understand about, that causes not only terror. I mean, what Job called it, Job 18, he called death the king of terrors. But it not only creates the terrors of not knowing, but the idea of God didn't reveal everything so that we really understand. Now, we do know that individuals have had what they would call out-of-body experiences. They were on the operating table and they had an experience, and they have come back to tell us about it, and they have come back to tell us about what they saw. I'm not discounting those because I really believe that individuals that have those have those. Could it be medicine? Could it be the fact that they were in a different type of sleep? There's a lot of different possibilities. And I don't want to discount. I've known good Christians that have had these experiences, and they've told me about them or written them down, and I've read them. And I don't want to discount that, because that's something I don't think anybody really can fully explain. But I do think this. I do think that the Bible tells us that when we die, we, according to Ecclesiastes 12, verse 7, the body returns to the dust of the earth. The soul returns to God that gave it. Having said that, we don't need to fear death, because even Paul himself looked forward to it. If you think about Paul looking forward to death, it just seems strange, doesn't it? Paul would talk about being in a strait betwixt two, having a desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. And okay. But the answer is what he says. He says, it's better. It's better. We have to look at it that way. Well, preacher, hell's not better. That's right. So we need to avoid that. Now, having said all of that and led us then to that point, we understand that when we die, we return, the body itself returns to the dust of the earth. Matter of fact, I had a discussion with Suzanne last night. I did the funeral that I did with one of the family members, preacher. He was Reformed Presbyterian, is what he was. And when we got to the cemetery, he used the expression ashes to ashes and dust to dust. And I understand that expression. And if someone used that at your loved one's burial site, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But the reality of it is, you and I did not begin as dust. You and I began in our mother's womb. That's something to think about. We didn't begin as dust. Man did. Man did. Adam, as we've already looked at, was formed out of the dust of the ground. But, so it's not a wrong statement. It's just the way I look at it a little bit differently. So the body returns to the dust of the earth. It's gone. There's no more. But the soul returns to God again. Well, we've talked about the soul before. It is that everlasting, eternal part that man has within him. That is just that, everlasting, eternal. Will live forever. Will never die. Will never cease to be. What's interesting about this, and you say, well, why is this important? Well, it's not that we're trying to scare anybody. It's not that we're trying to frighten anybody. Matter of fact, what we're trying to do is prepare you. But there has been, excuse me, through the years, those individuals that have believed, and matter of fact, it has come back into vogue even within our own fellowship within the last 10 years, the idea of the annihilation of the wicked. What is that? Well, the annihilation of the wicked is just that. If you die and you are not found in favor with God, you're finished. That's the end of you. Your soul is forever gone. It has died ultimately. And so what that allows individuals to do, it allows them to, first of all, teach some other false doctrines with regards to what happens when you die, but it also placates the soul. Let's think about it for just a second. If you're righteous, man, heaven's yours, everything's great, and it is. It should be. But if you're a bad individual, guys, you're finished. You're done. It's no more. Ultimately, discrediting a lot of verses. But one very simple verse that comes to mind that it discredits is Galatians 6. That whatsoever a man sows, that shall he also reap. It tells us the wicked man can sow what he wants to and he won't reap anything. Well, you might say, well, annihilation, and that's terrible. Well, yes, it is, but it's not punishment as hell is constructed. And so you have a problem there. Then there's the thought, well, we're going to talk about heaven here in just a minute. And one of the great questions that's asked is where is heaven? I think the ultimate answer, at least for anybody, is that you can say, well, it's there. And we all, we've taught our kids, there's heaven. And then isn't heaven beautiful? And there's nothing wrong with that, because if you think about wherever you are on the globe, if you point up, if you were in China and somebody said, where's heaven? And you pointed up. If you're in Russia and somebody says, where's heaven? And you point up. If you're in Africa and somebody says, where's heaven? And you point up. All over this globe, you point up. Where is it? Anything other than the earth. Anywhere other than the earth. And so that sort of answers the question. But once again, there are those that have said and are saying and have written in the last 10 years of the idea of a new heaven and new earth is the recreation of this earth itself. And The recreation of the earth itself is such that we'll live here upon the earth eternally. Now, there are different fingers to that, and different ones have different teachings with regards to that. I do not believe that. Don't go home and say, Brother Paul believes something weird, that we're all going to live on earth. No, I don't think that. I think that heaven is a spiritual place. It's a spiritual realm. And I think that the terms that are used with both regards to heaven and hell itself in the Bible are exactly the best that God could use, and they are the best because God used them. But they're the best that God could use to get us who are physical to understand the spiritual place. In other words, when we talk about hell in just a few minutes, do I believe that it is truly fire? No. But I cannot think of any worse death or any worse event in this world other than being on fire, having your flesh burn, the pain, the agony, the discomfort, the hurt. And so I believe that the Lord uses that terminology because that's what we understand. It's a spiritual place. Well, what about heaven? It talks about streets of gold and gates of pearl. John did that in the book of Revelation. Yeah, but he also talked about it's going to be a wedding, evidently, because he said he saw a new heaven and new earth. He said it was as a bride, verse 1 and 2 of Revelation 21, a bride is dressed, if you will, adorned. And then you think about, okay, what's God using? Once again, he's using language that we understand. We're physical. We like the idea of the touch, the feel, the smell, the sight, the hearing. We love those things. We understand those things. And so God has used that terminology to help us to understand. And so as we go through now, beginning really at this point, and talk about heaven, and then talk about hell, we understand a spiritual realm that will ultimately take place, will ultimately be able to inhabit. Understanding that the terminology that God uses is to get you to, first of all, want to go there. But also with regards to the terminology of hell, to get you to say, man, I don't want to go there. I desire heaven. I want to go to heaven. I desire to be with God. I desire all the things that, as we'll run through them quickly, that I want those things. But I don't want these things. And so you say, well, then God operates, and you're trying to get God to operate out of the idea of fear. Well, you can look at it that way. I was with my sister and brother-in-law this week for a few minutes. By the way, Martin has been in the hospital this week, and so I'll keep him in his prayers, in your prayers. But I was with them for a few minutes, visiting with them, and we were talking about old preachers, the old preachers that used to preach very hard and pound on the pulpit and talk about hell and scare us to death of hell. Well, that's one way of doing it. We've taken more of a modern approach in the last many years of let's just spend time talking about heaven. We don't want to be scared. We want to be placated in the idea of the enjoyment of heaven. Hey, here's my thought. If it'll get you to heaven, if it'll get you to do what you're supposed to do, and hear the words, well done, good and faithful servant, that's what we'll do as long as it's in the Bible. So the Bible talks about heaven. Well, what is it? Well, we understand that heaven is promised, don't we? Turn to 1 Peter chapter 1. We'll try not to get you to go back and forth too many times like we have in the past. I know that gets a little tedious. I want you to think for just a minute about the book of 1 Peter. The book of 1 Peter has some really hard subjects in it, but it's a book of hope. It's a book of hope because it's written to Christians that were enduring persecution. And Peter writes it with the idea of encouraging them to endure what they are and are about to face. Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, wrote these words that we're all very familiar with. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his abundant mercy has begotten us again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled that does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you. What does Peter tell us about heaven? Well, think about what he said. Think about verse 3. You and I can have it. You and I can have what he's about to talk about. How's that? Because he has begotten us again. He has, one way of saying that is he birthed us again. He's given us life to a living hope. You see, there's that epistle of hope that Peter is trying to present to them. Through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. In 3 weeks, something like that, Easter Sunday, right? My plans are now, unless they get changed, to speak on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Why? Because it's so important. Oh, preacher, we don't keep religious holiness. No. But sometimes when people are thinking about things, it's important. Now, yeah, there are some people that think we only talk about the resurrection of Jesus Christ and birth of Jesus Christ, and the reason is because they only come on Easter and Christmas. We want them to come more. But the resurrection is important. Peter says that we get this through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Well, how does all that tie in? Well, here's the simple answer. Jesus Christ didn't come forth from the grave, and all that he said is not true, because he was a liar. But when we study, one of the things that we studied here back a few weeks ago in studying, talking about the deity of Christ, we ultimately said Jesus is, as the old saying goes, he's either a liar, a lunatic, or the Lord. And we found out he's not a liar. And we found out he wasn't crazy. So it must be the Lord. Well, the Lord's given us faith. But what is that hope? It's an inheritance. Everybody likes to be mentioned in a will, right? I mean, what if you got a call tomorrow and said you need to be at such and such law office on the week after at 10 o'clock on Monday morning? Well, why am I being summoned to the lawyer's office? Well, you know John Smith. Yeah, Uncle John, I remember reading of his will. Oh, I'll be there. Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. An inheritance. It's a gift. Incorruptible. Oh, we like that idea. In other words, it's going to stay. It's not subjugated to the idea of perishing. As I watched some of you come through here, and some came in the back door as well, I know you brought delicious food. And I know that food in a few minutes will fill our stomachs and will be a delight. But in 2 weeks, if you have any left over and it's in your refrigerator, what are you going to do? Probably going to throw it out. It's ruined. Peter says, heaven, it's imperishable. He says not only is it incorruptible, he says it's undefiled, pure. I don't know if you remember, a few weeks ago, I asked a question, and I told you, and Missy looked it up right quickly for us and gave us the answer. Back where they're building or are going to build, on the other side of the house, up at the top of the hill, they've got a manhole, and they've started digging where the sewer will run. And there's a stretch there, probably 20 feet long or so. And it's a trench, but they have, of course, dug it all out, and so water retains there, rainwater retains there. And back a few weeks ago when I went, it was this beautiful aqua color. Well, we found out, Missy found out for us, that that's probably because the limestone, all the limestone they're having to dig through. Well, yesterday when I got home from Dixon and Suzanne hadn't quite got home from work, I decided since it was threatening rain and I had left rain in Dixon, thus it was probably coming, not to go on my walk, but I would just trespass and go up that lane and see that water. Well, let me tell you, it still has an aqua color to it, but it's muddy and ugly and murky and it needs to be opened up and let it flood, let it out. Why? Time. Other rains have come and they have contributed to that area. And it cannot flow out, sort of, if you will, like the Dead Sea. Heaven's not going to be like that. In 1,000 years from the beginning, it's going to be just as beautiful as what it was the very first day. So Peter says, jewelry does not fade away, does not fade. You ever have anything fade? One of the times when we were still, Suzanne and I had been married for about 3 or 4 years. We were in our second work, and the church there had a house as well, and we moved into it. And when we moved in, something was said, but nothing was done about the carpet that was in front of the sliding glass door, which was the back door. It had faded. You can see a little circle. And so there's always a way to remedy things like that. So our remedy was we had the elders over for a meal. One of the sweet elders' wives saw that. Within 2 weeks, it's fixed. We had a little awning over that little patio there to keep the sun out. We had new carpet indeed. See, there's more ways than one can catch here. And so there was a circle where the carpet had faded. And you could see it because of the color of the carpet. But you've had things fade. Maybe sometimes things fade and we don't realize. So maybe we hold up something new against it. Man, well, think about how never fades. Reserved in heaven for you. Don't you like that idea? Don't you like that heaven is a place where a reservation has been made? Have you ever had a reservation anywhere? There's people there in the lobby. There's people there waiting, to get in. And you walk up to the host or hostess and they say, yes, can I help you? And you say, yes. How old are you? Right this way, Mr. Darty. You just look at everybody and smile. Yes, I get my table. I get to go on. I don't have to wait 30 minutes for a table. Because for whatever reason, we were able to reserve. So, well, heaven has been reserved for me and you. Heaven's been reserved. What does that mean? That means day of judgment. Lord pronounces us faithful. Well done. We get to enter into heaven, a place that's undefiled. It's an inheritance. It's undefiled. It's incorruptible. And it's reserved for each of us. That's heaven. Well, let's look at heaven in a little bit greater detail now. Look in Revelation 21. We've talked about the book of Revelation before, but just sort of as a quick reminder, John wrote this while exiled on the Isle of Patmos. This was John's punishment, to be exiled on the Isle of Patmos. And when he did, and when he was there, if you will, the Lord appeared to him in a vision, a dream. And it was magnificent. I mean, it has beasts, it has animals, it has moles, it has vials, it has things that you wouldn't think about. Just read Revelation sometimes, not with the idea of trying to understand what everything means. Just read it for the picture. I mean, it's fantastic. John wrote that, as we talked about here just recently. We're finishing up a study, remember, of the 7 churches there of Asia Minor. John wrote that with the idea of encouraging Christians because they were being persecuted. And so he wrote in a style different than all the other 65 books of the Bible, because it was sort of the code of the day. Now, I think I realize, as we've talked about before, if you stack up a stack of books on the book of Revelation this high, you've got that many different thoughts about the book of Revelation. But John begins by saying these are things which must shortly come to pass. So these were things that were vital for the church of that day, but we can learn the lessons for us today. Isn't it interesting, though, that while the Bible spends a time talking about heaven and talking about the afterlife, that it is the last book of the Bible as we have it. Granted, it was all different scrolls and books here, there, and yon, and through time brought into one, if you will, one codex form. But the last book of the Bible in the organization as we have it, in the last couple of chapters, God leads us with this thought. Heaven. Well, let's look at it. In Revelation 21, John begins and said, I saw a new heaven, new earth. First heaven and first earth passed away, so there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. First of all, John reminds us here that there's a certain amount of gladness that should be seen. This is not, oh, well, we went, or I saw. It's just like everywhere else. No. John said, I saw a new heaven, a new earth, not old, new. First heaven, first earth passed away, gone. Talking about earth. We know that when the Lord comes again, we were to talk about, and probably do need to talk about in this series, the coming of the Lord. Lord comes again. We understand that the new heaven and new earth, this earth, passes away, destroyed by fire, according to what Paul wrote. And John says, I want you to understand the beauty, and I want you to understand the meticulousness of which this heaven is made. Think about it. I saw a new heaven, new earth. I saw New Jerusalem, the holy city. And it came down from heaven. It came down from God, prepared. Do you connect that word with something John wrote earlier? John 14. Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you. Now John's saying with regards to heaven, when the Lord comes again, when new heaven and new earth are brought in from the standpoint of man is ushered in, guess what? It's prepared, but it's prepared gloriously as a bride adorned for her husband. I like that imagery. I've always liked that imagery. I guess I like it even more now that Suzanne's working in a bridal shop, because I understand the meticulousness of the dress. These girls go in and they try on, they first of all, they have a style that they want. So, they'll request a certain style. So they'll pick at the shop, they'll pick maybe 6 or 8 that they can try on, that they have size wise. And of course, there's some alterations that have to be done, but okay. And so the girls will try on anywhere from 6 to 600 dresses. And they'll try them. Oh, I like this and don't like that one. And then they bring now they bring a bunch of people with them, and there's always somebody, and I don't like that one. And then the next time it's somebody else. I don't like that one on the others. That's awful. But when they finally pick the dress, then things have to be done. Not only does it have to be taken in here and taken in there. Well, I really wanted this to it, and I really wanted that to it, and I really wanted buttons. Suzanne told me that she has a dress she's working on now. She said the girl wants buttons down the back. Wonderful. I'm thinking 3 or 4. Suzanne looks at me and says, 60. Ooh. Really? Yeah. It's got to be just straight. I said, well, if she walks crooked, me, I'm always poking fun at everything. But anyway, the meticulousness of which it's going to be prepared. John says, this is going to be a glorious place. This is not going to be some haphazard thrown together party. This is prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. Glorious place. I mean, you can't get it any finer. But look, if you want to get it finer, look at the beginning in verse 12. That's what it says. She had great high walls, 12 gates, 12 angels at the gates, names written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, and 3 gates on the west. Now the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And he who talked with me had a gold reed to measure the city, its gates and its walls. The city is laid out as a square. Its length is as great as its breadth, and he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. Its length, breadth, and height are equal. One of the things you find out about this heaven is that it's a cube. Well, what's so big about that? Cube is seen as ultimate perfection geometrically. So in other words, heaven's perfect. It's always interesting. You've heard me talk about watching the DIY shows. I enjoy them. I don't know why. I just enjoy them. I appreciate folks that are like Jim can construct and all. I don't have that talent, but I appreciate those folks. But if you watch the DIY shows, they don't show you failures. They don't show you the flaws in the wall that are really there. And if you look closely, sometimes they make a mistake and they don't edit it out. And it's there and you see it. You see, nothing is ever completely smooth, completely without little nicks or flaws. But heaven's going to be perfect. It's going to have everything that it needs. Verse 18, the construction of its wall was of jasper. The city was pure gold, like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedonian, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardius, and the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. The 12 gates were 12 pearls. Each individual gate was of 1 pearl. The street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. And I saw no temple in it. The Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are in its temple. Now, let's kind of move for just a minute. We've thought about what it's going to be like from the standpoint of its beauty, its preparedness. We have to ask ourselves, who's going to be there? Who's going to be there? Who's there? Well, John gives us an answer. He says, I saw God. I saw the Lamb. I saw the Lord. I saw God, Father, and I saw the Son. And the city, verse 23, had no need of sun or moon to shine in it, for the glory of God illuminated it, and the Lamb is its light. You don't have to worry about light switches. You don't have to worry about going to the store and buying light bulbs. And you're not going to be asked to be the one that replaces the light bulbs. I don't mind replacing light bulbs, but one work that I was in, I had a lady and she would come Tuesday through Saturday and she worked for a couple hours. It was a retirement job and she would come and work, like I say, a couple hours and then she'd leave because that was all she could physically handle. And I hadn't been there maybe a couple of weeks. She came knocking on my door one morning. And, come on in. And she has this light bulb and she's holding it up. Well, you won't understand. She said, I know you have a contract with the elders. I said, you're right. And she said, I also know, because I talked to one of them, there's nothing in that contract about putting a light bulb in. I said, you're absolutely right. But she said, you got that job. I'm not stupid. Look like it, but I'm not stupid. I said, yes, ma'am. Where's the ladder? She said, I already got it fixed. I already got the ladder fixed, but I do not climb ladders. I got the ladder fixed. I got a light bulb here. Let's go. Yes, ma'am. So we took out and we changed the light bulbs. And every light bulb that was changed in that church building, I did it. Thank you, Jay. Jay changes out our light bulbs. But just fine. You don't have to worry about that. The Lord's going to light it up. Verse 24. And the nations of those who are saved will walk in its light, and the kings of the earth bring their glory and honor into it. Who's going to be there? Will everybody be there? Not everybody. But notice what he says. Those who are saved. Now, catch that. Catch that. That's vital to teaching folks that we know and love why it's so important that they obey the gospel. Heaven is for those who are saved. Now, I have to flip back a page, but if you look in verse 7, it says, he who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. It's to those that overcome. It's the saved who overcome. So it says, they get to enter into the gates. And then he says in verse 25, its gates shall not be shut at all by day. There shall be no night there. Open. Open. And they shall bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it. There shall by no means enter it anything that defiles, or causes an abomination or a lie, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. And so what does he tell us? He says, only the pure are going to be there. Only those who've been washed by the blood of Jesus Christ. Only those will be there, because if you're probably right there at the same opening, at least for me, it's the same opening, verse 14 of the next chapter, the 22nd chapter. Blessed are those that do his commandments, that they may have a right to the tree of life. They may enter through the gates into the city. The obedient will be there. So we have a glorious church. A church heaven. A glorious eternity. Think about something else. A glorious eternity. Heaven. And who will be there? The church, the saved. Those that have been washed in the blood of Christ, and those that have overcome. What a great, great place that'll be. How long will it last? Well, Paul answered that in 2 Corinthians 4 through, really, verse 14, the paragraph kind of begins in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 14, goes through, I think, the 5th chapter and 10th verse. Paul talks about that it will last forever. Well, how long is forever? Longer than we can imagine. Forever for a child is how long? The next 5 minutes. Really? I mean, Grayson, if you were to tell her something is forever, she'd think the next 5 minutes were forever. You got to sit there for how long? Forever. But it's forever. But as we get older, we think forever, of course, is a long time. Well, how long is forever? Well, it just doesn't need it. Okay? It just doesn't need it. Forever. And so that's how long heaven will be. Well, we didn't get to hell. We're going to have to close. But is there any thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions? We'll listen to them all. Okay. Well, hopefully I haven't bored you. I've given you some wonderful thoughts. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we are so thankful for today and for the blessing of it, for those that will come our way and grace us with their presence and honor you with their worship. We're thankful for your word, and we're thankful for the fact that it talks about heaven. And it talks about the eternal home that we can all abide in if we're found faithful. We ask, first of all, that you help us to be faithful individuals, that we will truly follow your will, that we will do the things that you have asked us to do and told us to do in order that heaven might be ours. We're thankful for the beautiful sign of the fact that one day it will be ours. And so we ask that as we live this life, that you'll give us the strength, the courage, the understanding, the knowledge, the wisdom, to be able to live this life so that in the end, heaven will be ours. We ask now that you watch over us, that you bless us and keep us. Forgive us of our many sins, for this is our prayer in Christ's name. Y'all have a wonderful week. Thank y'all